Hello and welcome to another video on the JJ Think Tank. I hope you're feeling well today. Today's video will be about the thought of Jacques Lacan and his concept of the subject, how he interprets what a subject is and how a subject arises to be. Now, Jacques Lacan for a while was a thinker that did not attract me at all. He was on my radar, but I never really took him seriously, perhaps. I considered him to be a bit of a fraud, a charlatan. And because he was associated with Freudian thought, I kind of dismissed him straight away, out of hand. And this was a mistake. This was a mistake on my part. But over the years, I've changed my mind slowly, and partly through Žižek, I guess, because Žižek uses the theory and the philosophy of Jacques Lacan to interpret reality, right? His own style of Lacanian analysis is used. But also by reading this book recently by Bruce Fink. It's called The Lacanian Subject, Between Language and Jouissance, I think is how you pronounce it in French. And this book was brilliant. It was a brilliant book. It's not even that long. It's around 200 pages or so. And for the layman, like myself, who is not really well versed in mathematics and logic, because Lacan even uses, in his theories, he uses some mathematical matrices, some logical functions and so forth to present his work. But even if you are not well versed in maths or logic, then through Bruce Fink's book, you can really gain a great admiration and appreciation for Lacan's thought. And now I perceive him in a completely different light. It was so many gems are found in this book. And I'd like to share those gems with you today. So, before I start presenting my thought, my interpretation, and what I remember most from this book, I'd like to play a short clip on YouTube of Lacan speaking about language, yes? How language ultimately it constricts us, but it does free us as well. Because as Lacan says, language is an intermediary to the real. And it's undoubtedly true that Lacan had a lot of passion for the real. He really had a lot of passion. And this video shows it with his marvellous French accent, and it's not accent, but obviously he speaks French in this clip, and we all love the French language. It's probably the most beautiful language in the world, I would argue, either French or Arabic. It's my personal opinion. But let's play the clip.
Pas toutes. Parce que toute la dire, on n'y arrive pas. la dire toute, c'est impossible matériellement, sans les mots qui y manquent. C'est même par cet impossible que la vérité touche au réel. Je dis toujours.
Lacan's passion for the real there was evident. When I was listening, even for the 5th time or the 10th time, something erupted within me there. But let's dive a bit deeper, I guess, into the theory of Lacan. Let's try and unpick it. Perhaps at times I will appear to be vague, or I might not be precise when presenting this to you. But if that is so, please don't be put off. As I said, the book is here. You can buy it online and read it for yourself. I luckily managed to find a copy for only £4 or £5 on Oxfam. So usually this something, I think this book can be quite expensive for 20. So I was looking at it maybe a few years ago. It was priced at 50 quid. So that's a bit too much for me for a book. But anyway, let's start. So this is a key quote of Lacan's, and the quote goes like this: "The unconscious is structured like a language." And on a first reading, well, it doesn't say much, does it? Okay. Here's again someone trying to appear profound and trying to show the power of his intellect without actually revealing anything, yes? But I don't know about you, but the viewer, I don't know about you, the viewer, my loyal viewer, but there are times in my life when words come to me more easily. I'm more fluent in my speech. I can express what I feel much more accurately. And then there are times when I can't, right? I have problems, I stutter, I keep umming and ahhing, yes. There's no flow to my speech. And perhaps this is a crude interpretation of mine, but this is what I think of when I read this quote. And why do I say so? I say this because when we are divorced from our unconscious, when we don't have some form of access to it, then we are lost, right? And because we are lost, we don't really know ourselves, we don't know our place in the world, we struggle to express ourselves and to use language, yes? This is why, for example, when you have a bad night of sleep, the next day you struggle to perform in general, right? Everything malfunctions, you can't speak correctly, and so your grasp of the language is reduced for that day. So this is just what comes into my mind when I read this quote. But then of course there are other interpretations and more concrete, logical, philosophical, scientific interpretations of this quote, and the whole theory that is linked to this quote, yes? But let's go into this now then. So Lacan holds a controversial position in psychoanalysis. As I said initially in my video, many deem him to have been a charlatan or a fraud who dabbled in these, logical, mathematical universes, these scientific lands, without really understanding them, and trying to link all of these subject areas into psychoanalysis unsuccessfully, yes? But then, of course, at the time in Paris, he was very popular. He was a celebrity thinker. He attracted large crowds of people to him, and yes, well, yeah, he was popular. So we shouldn't just dismiss him, right? Since he was so popular, he must have been onto something. And with in hindsight, we can say that this popularity was justified. Yes. And yes, these people who positively look at Lacan and his work, they pride themselves on Lacan's work, even, such as Žižek, yes, because his whole philosophy is based on Lacan, and many other psychoanalysts. For example, Bruce Fink, I believe he is a Lacanian psychoanalyst himself, yes? Psychoanalyst, sorry, not psychoanalyst. But yes, they view him as a light bulb landmark thinker who was successful in his radical attempt to understand the workings of the conscious, the unconscious, and other realms. So I guess the main presupposition here, according to Lacan, or when we view Lacan and his work, the main presupposition that we need to accept as being true is the existence of the unconscious. If we don't believe that the unconscious exists, then automatically the whole of Lacan and his work goes into flames. Yes? So we have to accept the Freudian thesis that the unconscious does exist, and I believe it does. I think vast majority of the population believes that it does exist, right? Because not even Freud, psychologists such as Jung, yes, they also elaborated and analysed the workings of the unconscious in their own ways, yes. So it's difficult to understand Lacan's work directly and deeply, because on one level it would entail a knowledge of French. His original writings are in French, yes. Mathematics and logic to a certain level. But even with a level of mathematics at GCSE level, A level, if you studied maths at A level, or in general if you know some amount of maths, then it's enough, right? It's enough to kind of once when you read this book to kind of understand roughly the whole theory, yes. Even then, it's not really that important because this book is written in English. Yes, there's barely any maths here. It's English words, English sentences. Yes. So this book by Fink was very accessible to the lay reader, and the ideas there were just not enlightening, but they had an impact on me, and they put as you know, whenever you read a great book, you say to yourself, "Oh, he or she put the words in my mouth." Yes. So this was the experience I had with this book. And the main idea of the book is how it presents the subject, yes, what the subject actually is. So the first idea that I want to present to you is Lacan's workings of the unconscious using matrices. So he analyzes how the unconscious operates via the analysis of matrices. And this matrix-like structure is presented via a game of heads or tails, yes? And during this game, a chain arises which remembers or keeps track of its previous components, but which also, as I wrote down here, prohibits certain combinations to arise, which is equated to the fact of laws emerging. Yes. And these laws are the laws of the symbolic world, which we are kind of at the mercy of. We don't control. We don't control or influence this world, really. Very much like language itself. Before we are born, language already exists, and we are thrown into this world surrounded by language. And the older we get, the more we try to grasp the workings of language, yes, and to increase our power over it, and therefore, because we have more power over a given language and how we use it, we can express ourselves and our subjectivity in a much more coherent and effective manner, yes? So this is my kind of interpretation here, what I would add. But let me try and find the... here we have the matrices, yes? So I don't know if you can see. I know, I guess my screen here is quite small. But here we have this game of heads and tails. Heads, tails, chain category. So position 1. So first there was a plus, then there was a plus, position 1, then a minus 2, then a plus 2, then a plus 1. And here in the second part we have plus, 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 plus. And how can we interpret this? Let me read this part to you. So we have thus already come up with a way of grouping tosses, a symbolic matrix, which prohibits certain combinations. This obviously does not in the least require that a heads toss be followed by any one particular kind of toss. In reality, a heads may still just as easily be followed by another heads as by a tails. We have generated an impossibility in our signifying chain, even though we have not determined the outcome of any particular toss. So this amounts to a spelling rule akin to I before E, except after C. Except, in brackets, that the rule we have just created knows no exception. And later on we have, and in neither of them is a category free combination visible. A type free combination is in fact impossible here. It is also clear that if there are not simply ones in the numeric chain, there must be an even number of twos if we are ever to find a 1 in the chain again after the first one. The first 2 introducing a minus sign, the second, or even number 2 moving the chain back to positive from negative. So, I know this is a bit unclear at the moment, but now let me explain what this part here means. So, plus is heads, minus is a tails, but plus is a 1. So if there's heads and heads, we have plus and plus, which is then equated to a 1. If after the second heads, yes, the second time we throw the dice, or not the dice, the coin, and we have a plus, we have heads. If we have a minus, which is tails, we have 2, because plus followed by minus is 2. If we have tails again, we have minus minus, which is 3. But we can once we analyze this a bit more, we realize that we can never go from a 3 straight away to a 1, right? Because after a tails, yes, we have a plus. Even if we throw the coin and we get a heads, yes, then we have a plus, but minus plus is 2. We can't jump from 3 to 1. I hope this is a bit clearer now. And after a while, when this keeps on repeating, when we keep playing this game, in order to return to a 1, we find 10 2s popping up. So there's always an even number of 2s that has to appear before we come back to a 1, which is a plus and a plus, and a plus and a plus equals 2 consecutive throws of heads. When you read it, of course, it's clearer. But I hope from my description you have understand roughly what I'm getting at. So coming back to this even number of 2s that has to arise before we return back to a 1, how can we interpret this? So this is what Bruce Fink wrote, yes? Here the chain prohibits the appearance of a second 1 until an even number of 2s has turned up. So in this sense we may say that the chain remembers or keeps track of its previous components. Now this was, yeah, I like this. This kind of, it's cool, man. We've got some laws here that are popping up, some logical laws, and the interpretation of the laws. And then after this, Lacan goes further and expands on these laws. Yes, the chain remembering or keeping track of its previous components. Yes. But let's move on. So as I just said, the game produces a chain which remembers or keeps track of its previous components, but also prohibits certain combinations, and so certain laws emerge. And as it's obvious, we are very much subsumed by these laws of the unconscious, which is equated to the symbolic world. So we can interpret these laws in many ways. They can be the laws of language, laws of logic, yes, the laws of mathematics, arithmetic laws, and so forth, yes. But now, okay, we have an idea of this symbolic world, yes, but again, when we think about it, in this symbolic world, there isn't much space for a subject. Yes, we want to find out more. We want to know what is a subject then in the world of Lacan. How does a subject influence this symbolic world? How does he act in it? What can he do? How can the subject impose his will, his order, and so forth? Yes. And this is my interpretation. So what I wrote down was, however, what is important to note at this stage is that this symbolic world is not truly ours, as in we do not participate in it, until we introduce our own aspect of the residual real into it, via the mediation of our own grasp of language, however imperfect it may be. So, reading this, a thought just popped up into my mind where I'm sure my viewers have also been in such a situation in life where you feel excluded from language, you feel alienated from it, and you feel alienated from your peers who use the language, or from people surrounding you. When you suddenly, say, if you appear in a group of people and They're speaking, there's a discussion going on, and you don't feel you can really adjust to the conversation, right? You don't know how to make your mark, yes? And this is because the subject, in this case, the person who feels left out or alienated, they haven't grasped the language yet. They haven't become proficient in the use of it, and so they lack the confidence, yes, to get involved, yeah, for example, yes, into a given conversation. And the only way they can gain a firm foothold on a language, yes, is by not just knowing and understanding the symbolic world. In this case, when we look at language, the grammar, yes, grammar of language, sentence structure, how we write down words, yes, spelling, pronunciation, and so forth. But by introducing our own real experience of the world into the language, yes. And here I think trauma is relevant, because real how I interpret real, yes. Well, when I hear the word the real, yes, because we have these three worlds in Lacanian theory, yes, these three spheres or aspects, yes. We have the imaginary, the real, and the symbolic, yes. So the real is we could say this most frightening part of reality. This thing we do not want to touch, we could say, or in another word, trauma. Yes, I very much equate trauma with the real, and in trauma we all experience some degree of trauma, either a higher amount of trauma, a lower amount of trauma. And in this trauma, this wound is where actually the light comes through. And trauma is this residual real within us that we are able to articulate, yes? And by articulating it, we become our authentic self, however incoherent this may be, yes? At times we may appear incoherent. At times, perhaps a bit more coherent. Yes, but it's ours. Yes. And what I would add about the real as well now is that we can never really exhaust the real. It's inexhaustible. Yes, inextinguishable. And this is why I wrote down here, we are never able to truly exhaust this real, and things become circular, yes? So to use an English idiom, we are beating around the bush, as it were. Yes? So, I just talked about the real, yes? And when Lacan, when he was analysing the real, he noticed that there are limits to structuralism. Structuralism was it still exists, I guess, as a system of thought, but structuralism was a philosophical movement in I believe the 50s, the 60s, the 70s that interpreted reality as a structure, and this was based on the linguistic work of Roman Jakobson. He was a Russian linguist. Ferdinand de Saussure, Ferdinand de Saussure. Don't know exactly how to pronounce his word. His surname. Ferdinand de Saussure. Saussure? Yes, this man here, this gentleman. So he created the school of structuralism. But so yes, going back to Lacan, he recognized the limits of structuralism through which we try to approach the real. And how can we explain this? In what way was it limited? So it was limited because structuralism only explains reality on the first order level of, and by first order we can say the first level of things, yes, which gives precedence only to the mathematical determinant combinatory, which plays itself out without any reference whatsoever to subjects or objects. So a law, basically, right? So, because laws, in general, when we think of laws are impersonal, right? There's no personhood or no sense or idea of the subject. That also has some impact, yes? So going back to the previous part in my article, it's very much similar, this idea, to what we had about the game of heads or tails, yes? So this game resulted in laws that appeared, but these laws are kind of impersonal and part of the game itself, yes? They don't relate at all to the idea of the subject, yes? So, to conclude, while structure plays a part in the conscious and unconscious, it is not the be-all and end-all. And therefore, for Lacan, there is such a thing as subject. Because this is important, because many philosophers and philosophies, they don't recognize the idea of a subject. They don't believe there is such a thing as a subject, yes? We can think of Buddhism, for example. Yes, Buddhism is a philosophy that rejects the idea of a subject. We are all just these illusory formations of particles and matter that are indeterminate and therefore lack any power, yes, or influence. These are very much Eastern philosophies, yes, but in the West, Lacan was obviously a Western style philosopher. He was French. He was part of the Western tradition. He upheld the idea of there being a subject. But obviously, every philosophy has its own kind of conception of what a subject is. Yes, some philosophers perhaps emphasize too much the role of the subject. Others less so. So for Lacan, what is the subject? And this is the most important and exciting part of the book. For Lacan, the subject is nothing but the split between ego and the unconscious, between conscious and unconscious, and comes into being as a pulse-like movement, via metaphor, which is spark-like, yes? As alluded to by the lightning on the cover of Fink's book. So here we have lightning coming down, yes? So this underlines the idea that the subject is fleeting, it comes and goes, and that this is I found this sentence to be key and interesting, that has the potential to signify something entirely different from what it says. And when I read this sentence, now and beforehand, this thought always comes into my mind that when a person utters something, maybe initially, when you first listen to it, you don't interpret the significance and meaning of what he or she said. But then after a while, in hindsight, you look back and you think, yes, that person was wise, wasn't he? He was correct. Or, I wish I listened to that person. Yes? This is what this sentence brings to mind, yes, when I read it. Also, another thought that comes into mind when I read this important sentence by Bruce Fink and Lacan is how a person may say something, but then there's an underlying meaning, yes, that is not quite obvious. And I'm sure there are many examples of this. I don't have something concrete in mind, but I guess when we think about language, a metaphor is like this, right? We have sentences that are more literal. When you read it, it says exactly. It means exactly what it, you know, when you read it. There's just the literal meaning. Yes, there's nothing behind the sentence, so to speak. There's no hidden meaning there. But then we can have metaphors, yes, that have a specific meaning. So before I finish, there's one more point I want to make, and that I wanted to share with you because it was another aspect of Lacan's theory that was for me a light bulb moment. And this concerns Lacan's interpretation of science and its supposed attempts to close the gap between cause and effect. Yeah, so when we step back and we look at science and we think about science on a meta level, yes, science keeps on trying to provide a grand theory of reality, yes. It tries to explain everything down to a T, express everything in terms of laws, impersonal laws, and so forth, and through this to close the gap, yes, between cause and effect, viewing everything as adherent to strict laws, and so evicting, suturing. This is a new word for me that I found. I didn't come across this word before. The first time I saw it was actually in this book. So it's an interesting word, suturing. The role of the subject. So suturing, evicting, yes, kind of. Yes, getting rid of the subject, yes, that making sure that the subject doesn't have an impact, yes. And because of this, to kind of show that reality is smooth, yes, that there are no hiccups, yes, there are no unexpected events or occurrences, yes. But what Lacan after what he writes is this, that paradoxically, whenever science tries to close this gap between cause and effect and suture the role of the subject, the cause itself is suited. Now, I still haven't totally grasped this, but it makes you think. It really does make you think. Paradoxically, however, the cause itself is suited. The cause itself is suited. Yeah, I can't provide anything for you at the moment, but I found this to be really interesting. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I rambled on for a long time today, nearly 40 minutes, but it's because I had a lot of passion for this book. All I have to say is I recommend it. There are a lot of gems here, 200 pages. You won't regret it. I'll tell you for sure. I can assure you that you won't regret it. So yes, I've barely scratched the surface when it comes to this book itself. And yes, I guess I'll finish with a quote by Lacan. So once the subject himself comes into being, he owes it to a certain non-being upon which he raises up his being. And with that, I'll end my video for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and all of my other work. And I'll see you on the next one.